Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back. In this video, we're going to continue with our reflections from Shari'atul Islam, and I want to continue with what we left off in with the discussion on speaking the truth in our speech. So the Shaykh says, may Allah be happy and pleased with him, وَيَتَحَرَّ الصِّدْقَ فِي كَلَامِهِ مَسْتَطَعَ, that one should try to the extent that they are able to do so to always speak the truth. This is what Muslims are always asked to do or ordered to do. فَإِنَّ فِيهِ النَّجَاةِ, because one's salvation lies in speaking the truth. And also فَإِنَّ الْكَذِبَ أَبْغَضُ الْأَخْلَاقِ, that lying is one of the most detestful character traits that one could ever have as well. And this is of course what the Prophet, peace be upon him, was free from. May Allah be pleased with him. فَإِنَّهُ مُجَانِبٌ لِلْإِيمَانِ, that speaking the truth safeguards one's faith. وَإِنَّ الْمَلَكَ يَتَبَاعَدُ مِنَ الْكَاذِبِ مِقْدَارَ مِيلَ. So he talks about distance, but he's basically saying that the angels maintain a distance from a person who lies. So if you think about how a person who is speaking in an immoral way or lying or in a detestful way, even though its speech, it has an effect, and a spiritual effect, in the sense that the angels flee, if you like, from such a person, presumably because of the detestful scent that emerges from that person, the smell that comes from that person, the stench that emerges from that person. And the Shaykh gives an example: وَلَا يَقُولَنَّ لِصَبْيٍ أُسْكُتْ. One should, for example, not say to a child that if you stay quiet, I'll buy you something, and they have no intention to buy something for them. So sometimes we do this with our children. We say things to them to get them to behave, and we don't really have an intention to fulfill what we've said to them. This is a form of lying as well. So it's not something minor, but it is significant. The Shaykh also mentions that there are times when one might find that there's a dispensation, in terms of a person might find that it necessitates lying, but these forms of lying are always done for a good cause. I mean, the intention is always good as well. And he mentions three of them. الرجل يكذب في الحرب. One of them is when it comes to war. فإن الحرب خدعة, that war is a form of deceit. And the second one, والرجل يكذب بين الرجلين ليصلح بينهما, that a person lies between two people in order to bring them together. Again, it's a sort of utilitarian ethic, which is that we're seeking a good end here. In this war, it's the same end. It's the same idea that one is lying in war to bring a good conclusion. And the third one is to lie with one's spouse to make her happy, to bring her to bring joy and happiness to her life. And this is very, very important. Then he also says وَلَا بَأْسَ بِالْمَعَاذِيذِ وَالْكِنَايَاتِ مِنَ الْكَلَامِ. There's no harm in using indirect forms of speech or a sort of figurative way of expression. So sometimes being direct can be offensive, so one has to be judgmental in the language that they use, and sometimes it can seem a little bit uncomfortable to speak directly. So for example, a modern example is someone may have lost their job, they might have been fired from their job, and in our society to say that you're unemployed is sometimes seen in a very negative light. So someone might say rather, and they might say, I'm in between jobs. So rather than saying I'm unemployed or I'm fired, they may say that I'm in between jobs. And that's a form of speaking the truth, but it's a more palatable way of expressing a certain idea that a person may have. And the Shaykh says there's nothing wrong in doing that. And then he mentions that one should stay away from certain things when he is speaking. I mentioned in the previous video that when a person says something, it has legal consequences in the eyes of the law. The first one he says is al-mira'a wal-jidala فَإِنَّهُ مِفْتَاحُ الضَّلَالَةِ وَالْعَدَاوَةِ, that to argue with people, to get involved in disputations with people, because this is the door to misguidance and enmity. We see this on social media everywhere. I mean, so many of us will know people who spend their entire life or online presence basically arguing and disputing with other people. This leads to misguidance. People are misguided because in many cases, if you look at Muslims out there, for example, they don't really know their religion much. They don't really understand their faith. They may claim that they do, but it only takes a little bit of exploration to find out that they don't know their faith that well. And they spend most of their time arguing and debating with people or watching debates when they don't even know what the original position is. And it's very, very common in our age as well. And of course, it creates enmity and hatred between people. There are times, of course, when one needs to speak the truth. But that's an exception to the rule. Then he mentions al-hajwu, which is basically to mock people or to use satire. وَهُوَ مَا يُنَفِّرُ قَلْبَ الرَّجُلِ عَنْ أَخِيهِ الْمُسْلِمِ, to go in such a way that one creates an atmosphere where people hate that person, to mock them. Okay, and this is a detestable form of talking. You'll see people that spend their time mocking others. The third thing the Shaykh mentions is al-ghibatu, which is backbiting. وَهُوَ أَن يَذْكُرَ الرَّجُلُ أَخَاهُ بِمَا يَكْرَهُ بِصَرِيحٍ بَيَانٍ, that someone, if he was to hear what you said, he would not like what you have expressed about him. Okay, or one might have said it directly, or one might have said it through ishara. That's very, very common today as well. Even among scholars will allude towards deficiencies, or they will attack other ulama using this sort of tactic. That's not the way of our elders. If scholars had issues with each other, they would debate them in a scholarly manner. Okay, not use the public, the pulpit, or to use the mic or the mosque to sort of confuse the masses. Everything has its place. أو يحث أحد على ذكر معايبه, or he kind of like in his speech he is trying to find faults in others. And I always tell people this as a form of nasiha: if you're listening to an imam or a public speaker or a preacher and he spends a lot of his time attacking others or othering, especially when they're Muslims, then there's something really fundamentally problematic there. There's a form of insecurity there as well. Okay, so this is very, very important to stay away from as well. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, as we know in other places, he mentions al-ghibatu ashaddu min az-zina, that backbiting is much worse than fornication. And one may not be speaking about somebody else, but just listening to them, the Shaykh says sharikul muqta fil is, you're a partner in the crime. Just being present there and listening to what is being said about others, that's also a form of ghiba as well. Illa, he makes an exception, an yazkur al-fajira bima fihi liyahdhura an-nas, that one may want to say something about a sinful person so that they protect the people. So there is an exception, that if it's clear that this person is causing problems in the community, then one may engage in this sort of talk. But the intention should be to protect the people. And often we don't find that. Often it's just for competitive ends as well. Okay, so this is something to bear in mind. And he mentions namima, which is another sin of the tongue, which is gossiping about people. Like you're talking about other people, sirra ahadin ila ma yakrahu sama'u, something that if they heard about what you're saying about them, they would not like it. And he mentions a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, mentioned by Bukhari and Muslim: an-namam la yadkhulul jannah, a person who engages in namima, in gossip about others, then they will not enter paradise. Wa kafa bihi wa'id, this is a very stern warning from the Messenger, peace be upon him. So this is also important. He mentions another one, which is al-qubhu wa-shad, which is to swear or to use foul language. He gives the example of the Prophet Jesus, Isa alayhi salatu salam, may Allah be pleased with him, when he saw a pig, murra bisalamin, he went past by it, فَقِيلَهُ فِي ذَلِكَ فَقَالَ أَكْرَهُ أَنْ أُعَوِّدَ لِسَانِ الشَّرِّ, that he went past this animal very, very quickly, but he didn't say anything to it, because he said, I didn't want to be in a situation where I might say something unpleasant to this creature, even though it's a creature that's haram for Muslims to consume. وَمَرَّ عَلَى كَلْبٍ مَيِّتٍ فِي جَمَاعَةٍ. The example again is given about a dog فذكروا في مقابي شيئا. So someone once went past a dog and he said something nasty about the dog, which was inappropriate. فقال ما أحسن بياض أسنانه. So rather than telling him off, this was a way of pedagogy, a way of teaching. He said, how beautiful is its teeth. And it was to remind him that one should not say bad things. So this is another way of teaching people. Rather than telling people not to say something, one says something nice to remind them that this is the way to say. وَلَا يَلْعَنُ شَيْءًا مِنْ خَلْقِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. One should not curse anything from the creation of God. وَلَا يَتَعْوَدُ اللَّعْنَةَ فَإِنَّ لَعْنَ الْمُؤْمِنِ كَقَتْلِهِ. And one should not especially curse a fellow believer. And a person who engages in cursing is a shafihan. He will shafi'an. He says that he will not be one of those people who will be granted intercession on the day of judgment. Like he won't be able to intercede for the people because he spends his entire life in this world cursing others. So how can you help other people in the life to come as well? وَلَا شَهِيدًا فِي الْمَحْشَرِ. And he will not be from those who are counted from those who are martyred in the path of God. So this is something to bear in mind as well. This is a very important. وَلَا يَرْمِي رَجُولًا بِكُفْرٍ وَلَا فِسْقٍ. One should not aim. This is Rama Yarmi, means to literally shoot an arrow. One should not accuse another person of kufr or infidelity. فَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ يَرْتَدُّ عَلَيْهِ إِنْ كَانَ الْمَرْمِيُّ بَرِيئًا. If that person is free, if that person is not guilty of what you're accusing them of, it will come back to you. It's a very severe warning from the Shaykh, but also from the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, because this is mentioned in the books of Sunnah as well. And so this is, especially in our age where people seem to be doing this as a matter of gaining more followers or just to gain more notoriety, this is something that one should be very, very careful. One should guard their tongue about these things. And there are many usuls in the books, principles of how one should engage with someone who says something that might be seen as kufr or out of the fold of Islam. And maybe one day I will do a longer discussion on this for you. Okay, I'll mention a few more just to finish off. Okay, one should not وَلَا يَتَكَلَّمُ بِمَا لَا يَعْنِيهِ. One should not talk about those things which are of no benefit. By futile talk, one should stay away from these things. He says, فَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ يُنْقِصُ مِنْ عَقْلِ. This creates your intellect to be deficient. وَرُبَّمَا يَصِيرُ وَبَالًا عَلَيْهِ. Sometimes it can become a form of curse for you because you say something without really thinking about it, giving it much thought, and it becomes a curse for you as well. So this is what the Shaykh is telling us to stay away from. And he says one should not praise someone in front of them because it's a form of dhabh. It's a form of, like, you're literally sacrificing a person, and especially if it's a sinful person. One should not fasiq, a sinful person. One should not praise a sinful person. وَكَانَ النَّبِيُّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ يَنْهَى عَنْ مَدْحِهِ. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, the Prophet peace be upon him, forbade people from praising others in front of them. وَيَقُولُ أَنَا عَبْدُ اللَّهِ أَرْجُوهُ وَأَخَافُ. I am a slave of Allah, I have hope in God, and I also fear God as well. So he mentions that the Prophet himself was cautious about being praised too much. And if someone does praise you in front of you, it can happen, then you say, Allahumma ja'alni khayran mimma yadhunnun. Allah, make me better than what you think about me. Waghfir li ma la ya'lamun. Allah, forgive me for what He knows. Wa la tu'akhidni bima yaqulun. And may He not take me to task for what is said. Fa innaka ta'lamu wa hum la ya'lamun. For verily God, you know, and they do not know as well. So and this is important. And one should not mock people too much. One should not joke too much. فَإِنَّ يُسْقِطُ الْمَهَابَةَ وَيُعْقِبُ الْإِفْتِضَاحِ. That if you joke too much, you lose respect for things, you lose reverence for things, and you sort of engage in shameless discussions. So Shaykh is saying that's not befitting for a believer to be engaging in. I think I'm going to stop there because this is enough for us today to think about in terms of guarding our tongue, especially in our day and age where everybody seems to have an opinion on things. People are too busy looking into other people's matters and not really concerned with their own salvation. Of course, there are exceptions. There are times when we have to take action against people, and I do that myself. If I feel that someone said something inappropriately or incorrectly, I will usually try and find a way to reach out to them. Seldom do I use social media to attack anyone, or do I use the mosque or the pulpit to attack someone. That is not the way of the prophets, nor is the way of the ulama. They would do it through writing. They would write books and deal with the arguments, which is happening less and less so, unfortunately, in our communities. People feel that they need to argue and attack people publicly without really establishing the facts. And especially with the scholarly debates, the best place to do it is in books. Read their arguments, engage with their arguments with respect, and show that you've understood their arguments, show that you've tried to give a good interpretation of their arguments, and then respond to them in a way that's scholarly as well. And I hope that I can do that and you can all do that. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.